things that really ailed people had to do with their behavior, which had to do with their attitudes and beliefs and the places where they were stuck in their mind. So all of the decades of training that I had that revolved around biochemistry, biomechanics, and a lot of you are nodding, I love it. I think I was reinventing the wheel because most of us actually know that. We know. I think I met one patient in the decades that I practiced who really did not believe that smoking was bad for him. But I met a lot of smokers. And most of us know that if we eat a ton of fat and all that processed stuff with chemicals that you can't even pronounce, it's probably not good for you. And yet, oh man, there we go. So my focus on forgiveness specifically started, I was trying to remember, I think maybe 2 decades ago. I had been invited to give a keynote address to a conference for cardiologists. And as a part of that, I reviewed the literature and to see, what information there was. And back in the 80s, there were a number of seminal trials that had been done, out of which the class of medication called beta blockers became standard of care after a person has an MI, myocardial infarction, heart attack. What I didn't know, because I certainly was not taught this, was that there were a number of other arms to those research projects. And what's fascinating is now that the Blue Zones has become popular, a lot of those other arms have to do with exactly parts of that wheel in the Blue Zones project. So for example, social isolation was linked with worsening outcomes, increased death, longer ICU stay, all of the parameters that they looked at, and repeat MI. So in that whole grouping, something that really caught my attention was a thing called held-in hostility, which was, as you can imagine, associated with worsening outcomes, all the things I just mentioned, and repeat MI. And the reason that really caught my interest is at the same time I was on an interfaith council looking at the role of spirituality and health in a variety of ways and giving talks and so on and so forth. And it had just occurred to me, like maybe the week before, that the one prayer that was in common in all Christian religions was the Lord's Prayer. And that made me real curious about that. And so I broke it apart line by line and realized the only thing asked of us was to forgive. You know that line, forgive us as we forgive others. And I thought, because when I was reading these studies, it's like, okay, held in hostility. So the reason I wasn't taught that as an internal medicine doc is what do you do with that information? There are no pills. Wouldn't that be great? The anti-hostility pill. We'd be popping it. We'd be giving it to everybody else, right? And so I thought, it was just like this explosion in my mind that there's the answer. I mean, there is a remedy to this. And that began for me a many year that continues. I'm here telling you this because I know it's effective, not because I've succeeded in all cases. I just want to be real clear about that. And I'm still working on it, but I know it matters. I know it matters. And it has led me to a continual questioning and putting my own feet to the fire because of the awareness of how much it matters. And so I've asked myself a lot of questions that I will share with you and a few insights that I've gained. And because all of us in this room, I presume, have some investment in this topic, I'm guessing there's a lot of wisdom here as well. First of all, the why it matters. Heart disease, as I said, but it's also associated with a lot of other stress-related illnesses, as you can imagine. So autoimmune diseases are noted to be worsened with this held-in hostility, or hostility by, it's held-in resentment, holding a grudge, use any phrase that works for you. but it makes things worse. And I meant to, and I did not review the literature, the data on cancer, but I feel fairly certain that it's associated for the simple reason that it is associated with a diminished immune system. So the immune system, of course, protects us not only from infections, but from our own cells that have gone awry and become cancer. Our own immune system normally recognizes these maladaptive cells and takes them out. And so if your immune system is diminished, it increases cancer as well as infections. So I meant to ask, Bobby, are you starting right at the half hour? Okay. So it matters for a lot of reasons. So we all know that forgiveness, like a lot of these things, have everything to do with application. So, you know, in school we learned to memorize the answer, get it right, and then we got really rewarded. And forgiveness, like all of these things, just doesn't work like that. You can know it matters, and then how do you put it into practice in our life? And there's the rub. So that's been my engagement for the last number of years. So first of all, I'd like to identify what forgiveness is and what it isn't. Because as I've explored the blocks, the why it's so hard to forgive, it has seemed clear to me that part of the problem is what we think it is. So I'll start by saying what it isn't. Forgiveness does not mean necessarily that you let someone off the hook or you don't insist on reparation or change or protection for yourself. So forgiving an abuser, I will say what that does mean, but it does not mean that you continue to accept the abuse, however you define that. And the reason I really want to focus on that is I think either consciously or subconsciously, we get the idea or have the idea that if we forgive, it means we're condoning, so it's not that, condoning the behavior and that we will continue to accept it. And it doesn't mean that. So we need to be real clear about that. It doesn't mean a syrupy attitude of, well, it's all right. That's not forgiveness. That is not forgiveness. It doesn't mean that we don't set boundaries. In fact, one of the paradoxes that I've noticed is that by being very clear, and here I'm going to introduce the word kindness, being very clear that an act of kindness includes self. Self is not separate from the whole picture. And to be deeply kind to self, ironically, is often being kind to the other person. So setting a boundary and saying no, or walking away, or just not engaging anymore, or whatever it takes, is actually an act of kindness. Because a person who has done harm to us, knowingly or unknowingly, also suffers. That's the second helpful thing. The first helpful thing to help us to truly forgive is to see deeply that all of the toxin that we're holding, the grudge, the resentment, the replay, we're beating ourselves up every time we replay it, by the way, is hurting only self. In fact, that was one of the more eye-opening things, a particular relationship I was really having a hard time with. I realized she was long gone, had no idea that I was replaying this. And I was letting her continue to hurt me by replaying it. And when I saw that really clearly, it was like, oh no. When I say no, I'm actually saying no to the voice in my own head. Because the toxin, the injury to the heart, this acid in the stomach, is all inside of the person holding the grudge. And when we see that so clearly that we are only hurting ourselves, it actually makes it easier to forgive. So forgiveness is not, I forgive you. That's not forgiveness. It's an inside job. That line had it perfectly. Forgive us as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Because when you unhook it, it is you who have the freedom. So that's the first thing that helps us do this. And the second thing is, as I mentioned, that if we really understand that the person who does harm is also suffering, it helps us to change the story from, I'm going to get you, or I wish I had said, to a prayer, if you will, or however you frame it, of, may this person be healed as well. And then release it. Some of you have heard me share this story. When I first really started working hard on this for myself, I went through a number of phases. And one of the phases that I can laugh about now was, all right, I'm turning this is a third helpful thing, by the way, I'm turning this over to the divine. And by the way, I really think that what you should be doing is, let me tell you, I know you're in charge of the punishment bit, but I want you. So I was still in punishment, thinking, even though I thought I was turning it over. So the third really helpful thing is to genuinely release to that which is bigger than we are able to know. We can count on that we don't know the whole backstory of any person or situation that has harmed us. We can count on that we don't know the whole history. We can't. And so we don't know what space another comes from. But it's extraordinarily liberating to self and potentially helpful to the whole situation to offer a prayer or a wish or a hope, however you frame it, whatever works for you, for the genuine well-being of the person that which has done harm to you. Because here's the secret. When we are wishing well in that way and we really are filled with the warmth of that, we ourselves are receiving the healing. We ourselves are opening up. Our own heart is opening, and that is feeding and nourishing us. And it just might make a difference for the other person as well, because if you can assume the other person has come from a place of hurt in the first place to do harm, they need healing as well. And then, guess what? They'll be nicer to deal with. They'll be easier to deal with as well. I've heard so many stories from people who say, and I've experienced it myself, I'm pretty sure that person has changed a lot. Well, is it our perception or is it the other person? Who knows and who cares? It's easier. And so to wish for the well-being, and this is another really important part of this. A number of individuals have said to me, you know, Dr. Iyer, I think I am better at forgiving others than forgiving myself. Yeah, a lot of people are nodding. That's interesting. You know, this culture seems to be quite unique in this, how hard we are on ourselves. And I think we bought hook, line, and sinker that somehow we'll be better people if we beat ourselves up. I mean, isn't that illogical when you think about it? I mean, you know, like the only way I can get better is to find out what's wrong with me. And I personally don't find that to be very effective. I find that I perform best, I do best, I am my best when I feel loved and supported and cared about. And the person most responsible for that is the one most inside of your own skin. And so to translate the harshness that we have in good faith trying to be a better person, to translate that into being kind to self as a support for being the best we can, still the authentic goodwill to want to be the best we can, but to do it in a supportive way. I mean, what more wonderful thing can we do for the world, really, when you think about it? Yeah. So, one of the things I really believe is that there's a lot of wisdom in anybody who is interested in this topic. And so I would love to hear any input or thoughts that any of you have at this point, or questions, or comments, or places of difficulty, barriers that you might have, or insights that you have. If anybody has any thought. You know, this kind of a crowd, I'm supposed to do all the talking, huh? Okay. So, you know, forgiveness as a topic really goes on. And one of the things that is a fairly recent recognition for me is that if you have to do it over and over again, and you find yet one more edge of difficulty when you sort of thought you were starting to get your act together, it's not a sign of failure. That as long as we are breathing and alive, there will continue to be another opportunity. And so I think as we experience yet one more challenge, that we can realize that this is, okay, I graduated from grade school and I'm in junior high now, apparently. So it's very helpful, it's been very helpful for me to frame the continuing challenges as simply, I mean, I think about how Christ on the cross, those were his last words, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I'm pretty sure that that was a challenge right up there at the very end. And that helps me remember that it's not likely that, I don't know this, it'd be great if at some point I just am so free and open, there's not a single thing that catches in my craw anymore. I'm 67, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I might have another couple of decades left to figure this out, but I know it makes a difference. I know it makes a difference. And again, the situations going on in the world right now, forgiveness is not just a personal thing. It affects our relationships. It affects our interactions. It affects the flavor, the tenor, the climate of the society around us. And I really feel like, and the reason I'm talking about this is, I really feel like we're called upon, and it matters more now than ever. There are more of us on the planet. There are more methods of intercommunication that stir the pot and provoke anger. And I really believe that more than ever, if we are capable of honing down deep in ourselves and holding this focus, we'll be doing not only what we need for our personal health, because it does make a difference there, but we will be part of the solution for what the world itself means. And I want to be clear that this doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean you don't act. You can be an activist even, just not an angry activist that pushes other people into an angry reaction. And so to be called upon to act from a space of grounded choice, to be kind and still do the right thing, That's the action that's going to make a difference. I, a number of years ago, made a guided imagery CD to help with forgiveness, and they're back on the box, in a box on that table. Actually, Ashok, do you mind pulling some out and just putting them on the table? So please help yourself, and if you know another person to give it to, by all means do. And it is time for Bobby Wilson is going to be setting up to do movement starting at 10:30. So if you need to use the restroom. Yes. Good to see you, Dr. Leffler.
So my name's Faye, and I work with estranged parents whose kids have cut them off the relationship. And there's a lot of family estrangement. Today, I think some pretty good research says that 27% of Americans say they are estranged from one of their family members. So my question is, wonderful talk, by the way, thank you.
Thank you.
But it's not just about how we forgive. How do we live unforgiven?
How do we live unforgiven?
Yeah,
oh, what a great...
We have significant people in our lives that don't forgive
us. That's a great question. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I wish I had more time now. It's a great question. So one of the tricks about forgiving is it's an independent clause. We choose forgiveness independent of the other person. So if you wait to forgive, for example, until another person says, I'm sorry, you might go to your deathbed not forgiving. So remember, this is about self. And the same is true in reverse. If we bring the center of attention down into ourselves and notice the turmoil that we have, whether that anger is going or coming, notice the reaction inside, notice the turmoil inside. Go there. I use the word pray, whatever works for you. Invite deep healing into that space, and then again, wish for that healing to go out. And it is independent. It is independent of the other person. Sometimes what I've noticed, and I also have a couple of family members that I don't know if there will be an interaction before I die. I don't know that. But I noticed how much better I feel every time I start to feel a little tension, to immediately go to that place and say, I only wish you well. I wish you deep healing. The letting go process involves, and requires a wish for goodness. We can't really let go unless we imbue it with that positive intention, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yes, one more, and then really Bobby needs a chance to...
That's what Jesus meant by love your enemies, which is hard.
Love your enemies. That's right. Thank you for that.
I heard a saying the other day, if you're having this problem with letting go, look at the part of you that's holding on and give it love, because that's what it's all about.
Yes.
You want the love. So I thought that was kind of amazing.
That's so beautiful, yes. Yes, if we turn around and give to ourselves that which we're longing for, that's exactly right. Yeah. Also, it's really helpful to say, have I ever in my life done XYZ? Whatever this other person says, like, oops, okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this off because I have to stop.
That's okay, I'm going to come up and say something if you're good.
Okay, Tammy's coming in. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Peace, love, happiness to you, Mary Ann. So for those that want to do Bobby,